This is Intentional Velocity, inspiring interviews and stories about always moving forward with purpose. Your host is motivational speaker and successful businessman and investor, Robb Munger. This broadcast is sponsored by the Intentional Velocity Group. Today we present in its entirety Robb's conversation with Uncle Ted Nugent.
This is my first Intentional Velocity radio hosting, so I'm just privileged. You're the man.
Well, I appreciate it, Rob. Are we rocking right now? Are we live?
We are rolling right now.
You're a good man, because all you have to do is close your eyes, Mr. Munger, and think back to your favorite campfire where family and friends and your fellow American working hard, playing hard, spirit of the wild blood brothers open up absolutely uninhibitedly and express the depths of their heart and soul. That always happens at a campfire. The hunting families of this country have always fixed any problems we have faced, and it usually starts around a campfire, either literally or figuratively. So you and I, Mr. Munger, we are on an electronic campfire right now, so you don't have to even think about being a radio host. You just have to think about sitting across from some glowing embers with some backstraps on the grill with your Uncle Ted, and it will all come naturally. Are you with me?
I am. You're awesome. This is why I wanted you. I said Ted Nugent asked to be my first guest, so I knew you'd coach me through it.
Well, it's real simple. Again, you just, you and I know each other. We don't even have to see each other. In fact, as I get older, it's probably better you don't have to look at me. You used to be so handsome. But anyhow, my point is that there's a free-for-all. Boy, there's a clever catchphrase if I ever heard one. You could make a song out of that. There's an openness, there's an uninhibitedness around the hunting family campfires, especially as the air turns cool in Michigan and across the country. And my buddies, if you go to my Facebook, Rob, you'll see families from all around the world that are up in Alaska hunting caribou and bear and deer and mountain goats and mountain sheep, and up in Canada hunting the caribou and the bears. And even in North America here, the Tennessee deer season opened August 24th. The South Carolina deer season opened August 15th. The California and Florida deer seasons opened up in July. And all across this country, in North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Kentucky, all across this country, September 1st is the opening day of archery deer season in more and more states, because it's about attracting more families and more hands-on participation in God's creation of renewable, sustained yield, protein, spirit, fun, trophy, sport, perfection. And that's why you and I are on the campfire telephone, because your dad and our dear friend Fred Bear and so many others, they established and promoted and spotlighted this perfect hands-on conservation, hunting, fishing, trapping lifestyle. And that's the essence, the nucleus of quality of life. So just let her rip around the Uncle Ted Robb Munger campfire, my friend.
Amen. Hey, how did you get the nickname Uncle Ted? I was thinking about this morning.
Well, I'm so cute. I'm too pretty for my Glock. You know what I mean? Yeah. There's an openness, and again, that's that campfire uninhibitedness that I mentioned. In the rock and roll world, early on, back with the Amboy Dukes, people would hear my radio interviews and hear me promoting the most politically incorrect stuff in the world: gun ownership and hunting. And it was the beginning of a culture war. And what I stand for, and the reason you and I are blood brothers, and all the good families of America are my blood brothers, is because they know that hunting, fishing, and trapping and self-defense are self-evident truth, God-given individual rights and freedoms. And I have always promoted that, celebrated that, and raised hell for that kind of stuff. So I made a connection with people as they heard me on the radio or heard me ranting about the sacred beast and the mystical flight of the arrow in thousands of concerts. And most important, I think, Rob, maximizing my delivery of the importance of being clean and sober in an otherwise drooling, stumbling, puking, dying, dirtbag, substance abuse world of rock and roll. People really connected with the essence of what positive people fight for, stand for, and how we live. So I think it's just a natural streetwise colloquialism that they started just calling me, "Hey, Uncle Ted."
How'd you meet Fred Bear?
Wow, what a great story that is. I was born in Detroit, Rob, in 1948. I mean, stop and think about that era. The inescapable positive goodness of freedom and America that was at the base of winning World War II over the evil Japanese and Nazis. I mean, everybody knew that Americans won World War II because we were fighting for individual freedoms, the only experiment in self-government in the history of mankind. And we knew that if we defeated evil, that we could implement capitalism and be compensated and have a quality life based on the sacrifice and risks and work ethic. That's important to note in 1948 because the positive energy in America was unprecedented, I believe. It was the greatest individual freedom experiment in self-government where we, the people, determined our own destiny in the history of God's creation. So at that time, the Industrial Revolution was raging on, and Roy Weatherby and all these wildcatters were developing long-range rifle ammunition for more accuracy for way, way long-range out there. But Fred Bear discovered what Saxon Pope and Art Young found in the last Yanni Indian, Ishi, up there in Northern California, and discovered the spirituality of understanding our not only relationship with wildlife, but our responsibilities as reasoning predators with wildlife and getting closer, not killing much because the bow and arrow is so limited in its range. You had to turn on your stealth predator radar and strategize more intellectually and responsibly and accountably to get close to game to kill it with a sharp arrow, sharp broadhead. Well, Fred was already into archery because he moved to Detroit with the new industries in Detroit from Pennsylvania, and he was already a hunter and killed a lot of deer with his 30-30 Model 94 Winchester. And he already was, winning some local and regional championships with field archery and some of the archery competitions. But when he got wind of what Saxon Pope and Art Young learned from Ishi, and they saw the newsreel at the Detroit Theater, I think it was, in Detroit, I think it was the 1940s, 1930s, 1940s, just before I was born, he really became addicted to the mystical flight of the arrow and trying to get close to big game. So when I was born in 48, my dad, Warren Henry Nugent, fresh out of World War II and Korean War, he was already an archer and a bow hunter, one of the few bow hunters in Michigan.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and so every October, my family would head north in the Ford station wagon with our yew and Osage orange longbows and our beautiful cedar arrow, Port Orford cedar arrows, with the beautiful natural, shield-cut turkey feathers. I mean, beautiful pieces of arrow art. And we'd stop at a little shack in Grayling, Michigan when I was a little boy, probably by the time I was 3 or 4. My dad knew who Fred Bear was, and there was only a very eclectic a sporting community that understood what Fred Bear represented in promoting a better understanding of our relationship with wildlife by getting close with the bow and arrow. And so I met this tall, lanky, friendly, funny, smiling guy in his little shop in Grayling back in the 1950s. I didn't know who he was, but I was already a bow and arrow maniac on the Rouge River in Detroit. And I think I had the world slam of gophers and chipmunks.
This is gold.
6 or 7. And I met this guy, and then over the years, we'd stop every year or so and hang out with Fred Bear at this little bear archery shack. And we'd have cherry pie and chocolate milk at the Grayling restaurant with Fred Bear. And then I started realizing, my God, Fred Bear was to my love of bow hunting what Chuck Berry and Bo Diddley were to my love of guitars. And so I got a little gaga over the time, because now I realized I was in the presence of the master. And he was just the nicest, friendliest guy. And eventually my dad represented a Swedish steel company that specialized in rolled blue-tempered spring steel that my dad connected with Fred on a business level and sold him that specialized steel for the Bear Razorhead bleeder blade inserts. And my dad started hunting with Fred Bear in the early 1960s, maybe late 50s. And then we had to move to Chicago because my dad got transferred in 65. And I started the Amboy Dukes, and I graduated from high school in 67. I came back to Michigan, and I immediately went up to Grayling, where now this Little Bear Archery Shack was this huge museum and industry. And I reintroduced myself to Fred, and we hit it off. He was a little taken aback, shall we say, by the intensity of my rock and roll. Because there was a bad reputation for drooling, stupid hippies, ruining their life with the drugs and alcohol. And so because I kind of looked like a hippie, though I wasn't, I think I was the ultimate undercover narc at the time. I was clean and sober throughout my life. I've always cherished that important priority. And so when Fred learned that I promoted archery, I shot my bow and arrow on stage for thousands of concerts with the Amboy Dukes, and I would always promote the discipline and the mystical flight of the arrow, that the ultimate samurai, the ninja, the Zen warrior, practice archery to become the path of your arrow with ultimate discipline and focus in life. And I promoted that in all my interviews, and people would contact Fred and go, "You ought to hear this Nugent guy on the radio, man. I've never heard anybody promote archery more powerfully than this guy." That's what Fred told me. And so we really struck it off, and I started hunting with Fred in the 60s, and I hunted with him right up till October 1987 with your dad. Years, your dad, Robb Munger, and Ed Bilderback, and some of the astronauts, and just wonderful people were up at the Grouse Haven up in Rose City, Michigan, and I'd share that campfire that I started this conversation off with you.
That was a mystical place.
If I qualify as a good human being on any level, it's because of what my mom and dad and Fred Bear and your dad, Robb Munger, and Ed Bilderback and the mystical flight of the arrow taught me about being in charge of my life, which is why I've always been clean and sober, because you can't get close to a deer if you're drunk or stoned.
This show's about intense velocity and about getting kicked down and then getting back up.
Hallelujah. Let me put it real clearly. Sometimes you give the world the best you got and you get kicked in the teeth. Give the world the best you got anyway, every day.
That's what I think of you. I mean, people can disagree with you politically, everything else, hunting, whatever. But I was just at your concert, in the last 6 months. You're 70, and I would have sworn you were late 20s, early 30s, not even close.
But the band said it best on tour. This is 2018. The name of the tour was The Music Made Me Do It, because when I was growing up and heard Chuck Berry and Bo Diddley and Little Richard and James Brown and Wilson Pickett and B.B. King and all the gods of thunder, the music made me do it. It made me get a guitar and pursue this musical creation. And on the Music Made Me Do It tour, 2018, I performed my 6,717th concert. 6,717. And my band, the greatest band in the world, Greg Smith on bass guitar and vocals, and Jason Hartless from Detroit on drums, they looked at me during a sound check one day and they went, if the 25-year-old Ted Nugent showed up tonight, you'd kick his ass.
I love it.
I think they're right. I'm a lucky man, but again, that's because I've been clean and sober. Everything's working pretty good. I've had a great diet, wild game, venison. I've been conscientious about what I put in my sacred temple. I meet guys that are 10, 15 years younger than I am, and they look like my grandpa because they've been smoking and drinking and eating garbage. And I just never allowed myself to do that because of the discipline of my loving parents and the hunting lifestyle. If you don't take good care of yourself, you kind of turn into a schleppo. You kind of stumble and fumble, and you don't have a good level of awareness. And as a guitar player, I want to pick up on the musical energies of my bandmates and the audience, and I don't want to miss anything. Why would you want to be stoned or drunk and miss out on that musical moment? And of course, if you have a brain, you wouldn't. So I've always cherished a higher level of awareness so I can be a good husband and father and neighbor and get me some backstraps. So simple, it's stupid.
Well, I like your comment. I was listened to one of your interviews with Joe Rogan, and you talked about donating deer and hogs, but you said I always keep the back straps, and that's honestly that's what I do too.
Stupid, you know what I
mean? I love it though. Now, Kid Rock, haven't you done some stuff with Kid Rock? Because he's another Michigan.
Bob Ritchie, Kid Rock is a good man. He's an incredible talent and entertainer. He certainly keeps that Motor City spirit and piss and vinegar alive and well. He's the real McCoy, and he's got this stunning girlfriend named Audrey, and she is a bow hunting monster.
Oh, really?
I don't know which is more impressive, her beauty or her bow hunting capabilities. She's always killing great deer and great animals with her bow and arrow. And Bob came out with her one day to the Nugent Ranch here in Jackson, Michigan, Jackson County. And Shemaine and I, we shared our knowledge about the mystical flight of the arrow and archery form and aim small, miss small, and the importance of grace and stealth and the archery experience and shot sequence. And we got Bob out of his 80-pound bow that was killing him. He was going to rupture his shoulders. We got him down to a nice, gentle, smooth, graceful 50-pound bow, and he became a great shot within a few minutes. But so far, according to Audrey, he doesn't have the patience to sit in a tree very long or sit in a blind very long. So he likes to hunt with a gun, and he likes to do some waterfowl hunting and some turkey hunt with a shotgun. But he's a real McCoy when it comes to music, and he's a great American. He's in the asset column. He employs dozens of people. He puts his heart and soul into every performance, and he stands up for the good things, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the essence of work ethic and self-sufficiency that made America great. So Kid Rock's the real McCoy. I really, really admire him.
What was your toughest hunt? I mean, I admire you. Other than hunting with Fred and my grandpa Bob, you're the only other person I've been around that just has that spirit that in fact it was 1990 after Fred and Bob had died. You called me and the secretary said, "Hey, some guy named Ted Nugent's online messing around." I go, "No, that's Ted Nugent." "Yeah, right." But you had just climbed underneath some logs and was bow hunting, and you were tracking a deer. And I keep thinking of anybody I want to find out about who had a tough hunt and was successful was you. And do you have any hunts that just come right to mind that you go, "Doggone it, this one almost just bust my tail," but you succeeded?
Well, all hunts are tough, especially when you choose to hunt with the bow and arrow, because you like the challenge, you like the increased odds in favor of the game. That's really what Fred Bear taught us, and your grandpa.
Oh, yeah.
And so they're all tough. But I suppose in 1978, when I first went to Africa, I went to the Sudan, and the rebels started killing everybody while I was there, and the Maasai and Watusi led me across the land from Quetta to Juba, where I had to commandeer a Red Cross plane to get the hell out and go to Cairo with it literally by the skin of my teeth. We outran the rebels, and they had blown up the Khartoum airport and killed everybody. And the natives saved my life because I made a good connection with them. They couldn't believe that I was shooting vultures out of the air with my bow. They really liked that. And when I killed a Cape buffalo with my bow, they were all excited. And I made good friends. So that hunt was tough because there are a number of things went on. At the time, I wasn't sure what direction my wife was going, and it turned out while I was gone in Africa that she was filing for divorce, and that's a tough time for a young man and a young wife. And so that kind of pain and difficulty exasperated the entire experience, and then almost getting killed by the rebels didn't help. And then the fact that I had a concert where the paycheck was $1 million in front of 500,000 people at California Jam, and I barely got there 15 minutes before I was supposed to go on stage with African dirt still in my fingernails. I suppose that whole week was pretty darn tough. But, I've camped on the hillsides for, solid, soaking wet and cold in a pup tent for 2 weeks in Alaska and up in Quebec. And I've had those rough hunts, but you don't really look at them as rough. You love that. You love that challenge, and you appreciate that you're putting up with these hardships and, eating freeze-dried food and some black bear backstraps because you haven't killed your caribou yet. But that's where you meet good friends like George Fairbear and my son Toby and Bob Folkrod spent some great tent camps up in Quebec caribou hunting and bear hunting. And so those are tough hunts, but that's why you do it. So you don't look at it as a painful experience, but rather as a rewarding experience. And now, over the years, I'm not interested in wet tents in Alaska anymore. I have a beautiful little cabin here in southern Michigan and in northern Michigan. And I like to strategize and check out this tree stand where I've, tried to figure out their travel patterns and maybe put out a little corn or sugar beets where the acorns have disappeared and try to, work the wind and the sun and try to figure out where these deer are going to show up because it's always about right place and right time. So all the hunts are very challenging and difficult, but that's why we do it.
Oh, I mean, that's experiencing life. When you do everything like that in a week, you come back 15 minutes before a concert. If really the audience knew what you went through.
Well, if you see the footage, they show the footage on MTV and VH1 once in a while where I got up on stage after getting out of Africa by the skin of my teeth, and we opened up with Motor City Madhouse. And boy, people, that's why people don't believe that I don't get high, because I really, really look ripped. Because I was excited to be back in the freedom of America, and I was excited to be back with a guitar in my hands, a Gibson Birdland, and a killer band in front of 500,000 people. So, I do get high on life. I get high on the music. I get high on the electricity and the anticipation of these amazing songs that I've created with these amazing musicians. So that's how I get high naturally. It's like the adrenaline surge when a deer is approaching that you decided you're going to shoot. There's no way to explain the nerve explosions and the difficulty of breathing and the heart attack threatening heart pounding when you've decided you're going to try to shoot this deer and the moment of truth is arriving. There's no way to explain that to people that haven't done it. But that's how I get high, and it's the best high in the world.
I was about 13 when you started hunting at Grouse Haven, and you had a manager. I come from the business side. You come from the talent and the hunting. But my grandpa, Bob, he asked me about you, and I said, well, Jason, I hear him on the radio. I don't know much about him, but I was only like 12 years old at that time. And he says, hey, you had been going through some financial difficulty. You had a manager that kind of misspent some things for you. You trusted some people. And the one takeaway I had, and that's since I was 12 years old, was he said, Ted told me he's going to plug his guitar anywhere he can, and he's going to fight and rock and get back on his feet. And it wasn't like you were out, but, this whole show's about people that get, you have the fame, but the reality is you go through a lot of crap to get to the fame. And so,
no kidding. Sometimes you give the world the best you got and you get kicked in the teeth. Give the world the best you got anyway. The man in the arena, in the swirling dust. I did trust attorneys and managers and accountants, and I made tens of millions of dollars a year, 1974 through 1980, and I still lived a simple life. I flew coach. I saved my money. I didn't buy a bunch of stuff. I had a nice Bronco, and I had a little Mercedes I bought with my journey to the center of the mind check. But all of a sudden, I found out that I owed the IRS millions of dollars, and these managers and attorneys and accountants had ripped me blind. And these were guys that would invite my children and I to their Christmas and Thanksgiving dinners and family time, and they showed me the documents and the paperwork, how they're saving me all this money and investing so I can have a solid future. And it turns out they were just lying and cheating, and I was completely broke by 1980. And I was absolutely heart-shattered that these people I trusted were such deceiving, nasty, rotten punks. That broke my heart more than anything.
Yeah, the
But
emotion. I mean, that's
it's like
real.
somebody loses their home to a house fire or a flood. You dust yourself off and you get back up in the arena and you go for it. And that's what I did. And I started the band The Damn Yankees, and we sold 5 million records between 90 and 94, and made great music with Tommy Shaw and Jack Blades and Michael Cardelloni. I kept touring not only just with the Damn Yankees, but with the Ted Nugent Band. And we toured and toured and toured and played, and I continued my reputation of putting on the most intense, high-energy, fun rock and roll concert in the history of electricity. And so I overcame the deceit and the dishonesty of punks in the industry, and I met a great man from Ann Arbor named Doug Banker, and Doug Banker did an overview and reviewed everything. I paid all my debts. I did not declare bankruptcy. I paid all my bills at the hardware store and at the feed mill and all the bills that I had, and I negotiated with the IRS. Boy, that was fun. I could tell you some stories there. But they ran into a dead-end brick wall named Ted Nugent, and I kicked their ass. So
But you didn't quit.
I got back up on my feet, and I tour every year, and I hunt every year, and I'm the happiest son of a bitch you'll ever hear.
You've been a rock and roller, and now you've been married to your wife for how many years? I mean,
yeah, Shemaine and I are celebrating our 30th anniversary this coming January, and our beautiful son Rocco is 28 this year, and I got a lot of sons and daughters, a lot of grandkids, but Shemaine is the queen of the forest. She hasn't killed me yet, so you know that she's a saint, and I don't know how I deserve her, but she's the most wonderful, smart, sexy, dangerous, active, woman, and what a bow hunter. If Shemaine draws her bow, sharpen your knife, because she waits for the perfect shot, and she never misses. She's unbelievable.
Now, do you gut the deer for her, then?
That's kind of cute because she's a rugged gal. She's the greatest cook in the world. She works out like an animal every day. She's got this Zumba thing, and she got the yoga, and she does all this workout, and she trains physical fitness, and she's 56 years old. I don't know if I was supposed to say that, but I don't know any teenager that she couldn't wear out. so Shemaine, it's about quality of life, clean and sober, and a good diet, and lots of exercise. But she's just so in tune, and she loves everything about life except one shortcoming. She will not gut her deer. I'm working on it. I happen to be the world's greatest gutter, so I enjoy it.
Hey, a question for you for my intentional velocity listeners. What's your best advice for, how you've used intentional velocity in your life?
Well, aim small, miss small.
Amen.
You need to focus in on the bullseyes of your desires. Prioritize. Always think of the decisions you make, how it affects your loved ones, affects your neighbors, affects your fellow man in the environment. Each step you take, this is the discipline of archery stealth, bow hunting stealth. How conscientious do you place that next foot? Did you avoid stepping on something? Are you staying in the shadows? Is your movement through the forest so aware and stealthy and accountable that you can close the distance to your target animal? In life, you have to have that conscientious, prioritized decision-making in each step of your day. When you make that choice, what are the ramifications? What is the ripple effect of that choice? Is it beneficial to your family and friends, or is it not?
Amen.
Join us all next week on 107.1 The Drive as Rob spends time with Cadillac Fire Marshal Anthony Wolf. Intentional Velocity, inspiring interviews and stories about always moving forward with purpose. Sponsored by the Intentional Velocity Group on 107.1 The Drive.